Hello, hello, hello there. Good morning, everyone. Let's get on here. Oh, there we go. We are up and live. It is a cloudy day, yes, and a little overcast. So hopefully, you can get a little energy and a little thoughtfulness pumped into your day. For those of you who are joining us for Coffee Chat for the first time, hello there. My name is Patricia Hayes. I am an executive advisor, career empowerment coach, and authentic networking strategist. And welcome. I am super excited, as always, to be here sharing some thoughts on issues that affect us all as we are engaging in our careers, engaging in our personal lives, and that meshing that has happened unexpectedly this past year, which is how these coffee chats began. They began out of a need to continue to connect with folks that I would normally have coffee with at least 2 or 3 times a week as part of my ongoing networking outreach. And that got shut down, unexpectedly. So I'm happy to have had these conversations, these learning opportunities, because they've been a learning opportunity for me as well. The whole experience has been very enlightening. So this month, for month of December, we have been going through and talking about personal development and personal growth issues. So for some people, that's a little more touchy feely. It's not the like hardcore, like go do this, go do that. But it's just as important and extremely impactful to work on these issues, because if you don't address your foundational core beliefs and values and things as they affect you in a personal way, they will absolutely derail you professionally in the end. So you want to make sure that you're feeding your personal growth as much as your professional growth, because in reality, the two go hand in hand, okay? And so that's the topic for this month. This week in particular, we're talking about accountability. We're talking about the fact that personal accountability matters. And it was so funny that I came up with this topic. It's been set for months. And then in some other work that we're doing with the live workshops and everything, it came up again. So I know, I do not believe in coincidences. I know that this is an issue that is definitely going to be of use and importance to someone out there. So here we go. As you know, I always have a couple of different things I want to focus on. And the first thing is let's get level set and talk about what do we mean when we're talking about accountability. And so textbook, definition is talking about having an obligation or a willingness to accept responsibility for one's own actions. And so it's really pretty simple, but it's very in depth, and there's a lot of depth to that, right? Because there's two different parts of it. Either an obligation, which means you're required to have some level of accountability for, based on a professional commitment, fiduciary commitment, something, right? Or a willingness. So that means it's something that you're not technically obligated to be accountable for, but you have decided by the nature of the responsibility or the act that you're taking on or whatever you're engaging in to take it on. So that's two different things, but they both end up talking about the fact of your willingness and the responsibility that you've taken on, and that you're going to make sure that you own up to it, that whatever happens, that you are going to accept the responsibility for the actions that ensue afterwards. And that is super important, because sometimes we get involved in things that we're not required to, and then people don't want to be accountable, without realizing that when you accept that level of responsibility or whatever it is you stepped into, that the nature of it means that there's something that you need to own up to and be willing to take responsibility for your actions in that, whether you're getting paid to do so or not. Perfect example of all of these are like when you do service on a community board, right? You're not getting paid to do it, but you've walked into that responsibility. You've walked into that leadership position. And as a result of it, there's a level of accountability that the board has to the funders, to the supporters, all of that type of thing, versus the same or similar accountability that, let's say, the president or executive director might have. But the difference here is that person is getting paid to be in that position. And so they are obligated by the position alone to make sure that they have a level of personal accountability and take responsibility for their actions. All right. So I wanted to level set that, lay that out there as an understanding of what we're talking about with accountability, whether it's, required or assumed, right? That's the thing, whether it's required or assumed. That the bottom line is that you have to be willing, or that you are taking on responsibility for your actions. So here's the first thing. Taking on and being accountable personally reflects our commitment to a goal. Now, whatever that goal is for you, I don't know. Are there multiple goals? If you're working with a goal with a team, or whether it's something solo, there's a whole host of it. But the bottom line is that when you hold yourself accountable, you're making a commitment. You're making a commitment to see a project through. Unless there's some really severe reason not to, right? And even then what are the actions you take to say, I cannot fulfill this commitment, but here's why, here's how I'm going to adjust accordingly, whatever, okay? But the commitment is to the long-term outcome, to the goal that's going on. And that's important, because when you step up to say, I own this, I'm ready to do this, you can't say that one day and then the next day say, well, you know what, I changed my mind. I really don't want to be bothered with that. I mean, like, how crazy would that be? How crazy would that be? So you have to recognize that when you step up to become personally accountable, regardless of whatever the situation, that your commitment is for the long term, or it should be, right? It's to the goal that's ultimately sought after, what's ultimately trying to be achieved. And that is important because people need that assurance, right? Whether it's the job, whether it's, a group of community leaders, whether it's your own family, whatever it might be, that commitment to the goal and what the long-term goal is very important, because it helps to build trust. It helps people to buy in. Okay, there's a whole host of things that feed into that, and why that's important to say, hey, this may be tough, or this is going on, or this may be unknown and uncertain, but I want you to know that I'm here. I'm willing to take on whatever we need to do in order to make this work. And that is something that is super important, particularly in our world today, when things are so uncertain and things are so crazy, and people are looking to something or someone to be able to latch on to. And when people are willing to own up to a commitment, that helps to build that trust, to build that loyalty, and all of those things, so that the long-term goal can get accomplished. All right? Okay. Accountability is also a commitment to growth. So here's the thing. And this is a great one. I love this one. And when I was thinking about it, when you're talking about accountability being a commitment to growth, and from a personal standpoint, somebody might say, well, what exactly does that mean? It's like, yeah, okay, fine. I'm going to say that I'm willing to take responsibility for my actions. What is that? How does that have anything to do with growth? Well, here's the thing. Everything that we go through, everything that we commit ourselves to, is not always going to come out all rosy and sunshiny, right? Like, there are going to be some dips, there are going to be some negative things that happen, and we're going to have to take responsibility for those actions that we were associated with on those things, whether they are good or bad, whether they are fantastic or challenging. Here's the thing, whether it is a good thing or a fantastic thing, or whether it is a not so good thing and a challenge, there is an opportunity for growth on both sides. And when you decide to take personal accountability to be responsible for your actions, whether they lead to something great or whether they lead to something not so great, that growth that happens on both sides of the equation is a commitment that you are making from the outset to say, regardless of whether things go left or right, good or bad, up or down, I am willing to take on the growth necessary to see that through. And I don't know that people actually realize that when they take on some responsibilities. And the reason why I say that is because the first signs of becoming really uncomfortable when things are really outside of comfort zone or unknown or looking like they're taking a dip, and folks are like, oh, okay, fine, I'll do whatever needs to be done to achieve the goal, but without realizing that part of that includes stepping into the growth that's necessary for you personally in order to get to that goal. I know that's a lot. Like, we have to let that sink in and marinate. We have to come back to that again later. But that's one of those things. It's like you're also making a commitment to grow. And growth happens whether things happen good or bad. Quite frankly, sometimes the growth can be deeper and more transcending if it's a challenge, if there's been a dip, if there was a failure, right? What do you learn from that? What are you learning from that to help you move forward so that you can help others to learn what it is they need? Now we're dipping into leadership, yes? Yes. And so you can learn from those failed experiences. You can learn from the successful ones. People want to get so riled up, and I'm always one for celebrating successes, right? Because I think that we often don't celebrate them enough, particularly as women. Okay, so I'm not saying don't celebrate the good things. But while you're celebrating the good things that happen, the good experiences that happen, think about what it is also. What did you learn along the way to achieve that success that led to growth in a whole new way? Whether you were leading a team, whether you were directing a project, whether you were guiding a board to get to a certain conclusion, to hiring a new staff, lead, whatever it might be. You get to that success point, but what did you learn along the way? What was the growing, what were the growing points along the way? So I definitely want you to think about that when you step into responsibility and taking ownership for your actions, that you're making a commitment to that growth. And sometimes people fail in that, right? They realize they're like, I'm not really ready for that. I don't really want to do that. And then there are consequences to it, right? So that can happen. It's not necessarily great, and there are consequences for it to the person, involved, as well as to the organization or the team that they're involved in. All right. So think about that accountability is a commitment to growth. Thirdly, accountability is a commitment or involves overcoming challenges. And I kind of dipped into that a little bit there on the growth side, but I want to lay that one out as its own point. Because when you take responsibility for something, more times than not, it is absolutely going to involve a challenge of some sort. Now, here's why this is important. Because too often, people step up to a leadership position or a position with a title, because we know that those are not necessarily the same. They step up to a position so that they can have the title, they can be the lead, they can be at the front of it, right? But what they are not necessarily looking towards is the fact that while it may look like sunshine on the front end, it's like, oh, this is great, I'm going to get credit for this. is that you have to realize, again, that good or bad, you're going to be accepting a commitment to overcoming any challenges along the way. So not just to identify challenges, but you're going to be accepting responsibility to overcome them, and what it is that you do or do not do to address that. That's a whole other thing, because we can all sit there and say, that's wrong, that's a problem, that's going to be horrible, right? Identifying what the challenges are is different than getting down into the dirt and actually addressing them and overcoming them. Those are two different steps. Two different steps. And sometimes people are willing to identify the challenge, to identify the issue, but they are not willing to do the work to overcome it. And when you step into a position, an opportunity, whatever it might be, and you are accepting the responsibility either because it's required or it's assumed, you have to know that your commitment is not just to identifying a problem, but it's to overcoming it. And so that's why your accountability is really important, and you need to be very measured in what you put out there and what you are going to be accountable for, because you could be taking on more than you're really willing to address. And that's not a bad thing. Well, let me take that back. It is a bad thing if you commit to something you're not willing to see it through. Okay? It's not a bad thing if you acknowledge that up front and then set the boundaries and whatever and say, you know what, I'm not going to be able to do that. I mean, I know earlier this fall, I've people contact me all the time about, hey, can you come be a part of this? Can you do that? And, I'm learning to say no to more things, or at least to give more thought to it and not just jump in and say yes. Because that can be the tendency, right? Especially for when I was younger with fewer personal commitments. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do that. And then you have all this time that's being eaten up because, again, I'm accountable to what those things that I've said yes to, right? I have to engage at a certain level. So I need to step back and address that and do some shifting. And that shifting in and of itself can be challenging, right? Because if I made a commitment to one organization and I made another commitment to another, and then they start conflicting, well, guess what? It's up to me to resolve that conflict because I assumed the responsibility to both of them, right? And so making those adjustments. So that happens from time to time. That happens in our real lives, in our professional lives, a lot. And here's the thing is, just because something gets presented to you does not mean you need to take it on. And that came up for me earlier this fall, where there were some opportunities, one in particular that I'm thinking about, to take on a new leadership role. And it was one that, honestly, the person who came to me with it did not know that it had been presented to me previously, like almost a year ago. And it just wasn't time yet. I was like, well, we'll see when the time comes. Well, the time came in a different format. But when I started digging into it and looking at what it was going to require, I had to say, on one hand, while I would have absolutely been honored to even be considered for that role and for that for that opportunity, I had to say no. Because I knew that, number one, it was going to require more than I was willing or able to give or commit to at this time. That I had some other commitments that I still needed to honor and address, including commitments to myself, right? Professionally and personally. So I had to say thank you so much, but I can't at this time. And that's hard to do. That can be hard to do because we really do want to step into something, or maybe we're really being tempted by by the buzz and the light of some of those things, right? It's like, oh, but that'll be so awesome, that will look great on a resume or whatever. But you can't let those temporary excitements and temporary little what does it say, when you're attracted to the glitter and all of that, you can't let that direct something that may have a longer term impact, and that then have you assuming responsibility and being responsible and taking ownership of any that comes as a result of it, as a part of your service in that organization, or with that group or with that company, if you haven't given full thought to it. So it's okay to say no. It's okay to say not now, right? It's important because it means you're being respectful to the people that you would be serving, to the organization you would be working with. And sometimes it can be like really hard to step back and to say no, but it may be required. The situation, the timing may require it. And I like to tell people that while the timing may really stink sometimes, hey Cass, while the timing may really stink sometimes, and you're like, oh, I cannot believe this, like I've really been looking forward to this opportunity for quite some time. Here's the thing. I strongly believe that if it's really meant to be, it will circle back around. And it's not going to circle back around in the way that you expect it. It's going to come back in a different form, in a different way, from a different person, from a different organization. But the opportunity will come back. Okay? So don't be afraid to say no, because if you say yes and you're not really ready to own up to that commitment and the challenges that are going to be required to be addressed, then you're doing a disservice not just to yourself, but to the people that you are working with, or the organization that you are serving. All right? It's super, super important. Okay. The fourth thing, we're going to whiz right through this today, right? The fourth thing, when we're talking about taking personal accountability and why it matters, is that it's a commitment to ourselves regardless of external factors. You see how these things just kind of flow into each other. When we decide to step up for something, and we have to recognize the things we've talked about, right? It's a commitment to a goal. It's a commitment to personal growth. It's a commitment to overcoming the challenges that may be faced. But ultimately, it's a commitment to yourself, to honor your own values, your own beliefs, and all of that, regardless of what's going on around you. And that can be a lot, but it's also the thing that most people overlook or take for granted. Because you get into something and you're in it, and then you realize, oh my gosh, like, what is this doing to me? Like, how am I able to remain true to my own values, to my own beliefs through this? And there's a conflict. And when you haven't given sufficient thought to it, now you're looking at this conflict of interest between being responsible to the organization or the company or whatever, and to your own core values, because you're letting these external factors drive how you would otherwise remain accountable to yourself, how you would take ownership for the actions that you're going to engage in, so that you can remain true to who you are and how you want to operate and how you want to be seen in the world. And when you do that and you're not being true to yourself and you're allowing external factors to drive it, then that causes friction. It causes problems. It'll cause you stress because you're trying to figure out who to serve. Like, you're trying to figure out which thing or which person you need to be responsible to, when ultimately it means you're not even being accountable to yourself. Does that make sense? I think that that is one of those things that is definitely overlooked, and that a part of that comes from not setting the boundaries early enough, or recognizing the boundaries early enough when you accept that level of responsibility, right? Um, and so that's how that friction arises. That's how it builds, and it comes. And so sometimes we jump into things. We were talking about that. Sometimes we jump into some things and we may not realize it till we're in it. And when that happens, then the honorable thing to do is to recognize it ASAP and then try to resolve the conflict, right? Because the last thing you want is a conflict of interest between what your own personal goals, beliefs, and things are and something external, okay? Because normally that's not going to end up well. It's not going to serve somebody well. Somebody's going to get burnt on that deal. And if it's a job or an external community or something like that, that's a part of it, a lot of times we as individuals will sacrifice ourselves to that, and that is not good. So, if you're looking at a no-win situation and you're one of the parties that needs to be accountable, to be held accountable to it, then a lot of times we're going to sacrifice, to the organization because we feel this external loyalty and all of that and whatever. But meanwhile, on the inside, we're feeling like crap. We're upset. We're resentful because you were out of alignment. That's ultimately what it means. You were out of alignment, and you got forced into a situation where you let the external drive the decision and take over, and so there you are. And so that means now that at that point, you have to salvage what's left. You may have to step away. You may have to say, what, I'm going to finish this out and then I need to move on, whatever it is, so that you can get back in alignment. Okay? Because if you cannot be true to your own self and take responsibility for your actions in a way that allows you to remain true to your core values and your core beliefs, then that's just only going to build, and it's going to become more and more problematic. All right? And that's not where you want to be. You don't want to be in that space. It's extremely stressful. If you're doing something that works against something that you believe in personally, or how you would operate, a lot of times, what kind of situation could that be? That can be one of those situations where you have I always had a personal little statement about no surprises, and I would keep that sticky note on my laptop or on my desk, and somebody was like, might walk in, and say, what does that mean? Well, that was my personal mantra to my bosses. Because, in my last few years of working inside organizations, I was at a pretty high level. Actually, most of those times I was at a pretty high level. And one of the things that was a personal level of accountability for me, not because my bosses actually said it to me, even though a lot of them might have, but I said, I will not allow my bosses to be hit by unexpected surprises if I can control it, if I can manage that. So literally, I would just have that translate to a little sticky note that says no surprises. That was my daily reminder, which meant that I had to be on my game on a regular basis to be able to deal with things that were unexpected, to be prepared to flip them and to address them so that I can address the needs of, the person that I reported to, right? And I'm talking about at really high levels. It was really high levels where those things can really, derail major projects and major initiatives. But here's the thing. You could have something come out from the outside. So while my loyalty or my efforts were like, my goal is to make sure that, I do and I perform at my highest level so that there are no surprises that, outside of my control that I can help to occur. But then when you have someone who says, well, you know what, your loyalty is to the wrong person, or you shouldn't be worried about that, you should be worried about X, well, now we got a conflict, right? And so it's like, do I stay true to my core value of making sure that my boss does not get an unexpected surprise, or do I succumb to the pressure from this other? It's like, well, no, you really need to do this way, and yeah, it's probably going to impact that value that you have, right? Those things happen. And so when you set those boundaries up front and and personal early on, that can help to resolve that. Right? That can help to resolve that. So for me, in doing that, that doesn't mean that there weren't surprises, but they were generally kept to a minimum, because I would approach people. I'm like, hey, we're working on something big. And I'm like, if something comes up, I need to know ASAP. Like, do not wait till the last minute, and absolutely do not blindside me in a public meeting. And by setting those parameters, I help to reset people to know where I would be, because if you did do any of those things, then you knew there were going to be consequences. Even if the consequence wasn't a quote punishment, but maybe the consequence was you are no longer a trusted confidant, or you are no longer on a list of people who were automatically trusted, and therefore that meant that you were going to be eliminated from conversations or discussions or something moving forward. Okay. I remember one year when that happened, when I was working for an elected official, I was furious. Because there was this meeting, actually unrelated to things we normally were working on. And all of a sudden, some statement gets made in a public meeting. I wasn't even there. My boss was there with another staff person supporting him. And I get pulled in. It's like, hey, Trisha, what is this about? And I was livid that this professional colleague literally basically lied in a meeting. But I wasn't present, and they took liberties with my boss so that I get pulled in to say, hey, what is this about? What happened? And so I had to explain to my boss, and I'm like, that is not true. This is how this went down, and that person is lying through their teeth. Do you want me to take care of it? To which he responded, no, I'm good, because he got it, right? So it was definitely one of those moments where he got caught by surprise. I got caught by surprise. But it was easily resolved because he's very sophisticated. But I was livid. And I knew that from that point on, that person was no longer to be trusted. And so when things came up with me, didn't matter whether it was regarding that particular issue or not. Like, that person was off my list. Like, you're done. Literally. Like, long term. I don't burn a lot of bridges, but I burnt that one. Because they had really violated the trust, right? And one of those things is one of those core things of where I say I don't do surprises with my bosses. And not only did he do a surprise with me, but like with my boss in a public meeting. Ugh, y'all, still thinking about that. But those are the things that happen, right? And how you massage it, how you address it matters. And if you have that level of commitment to yourself, so that you're not going to let external factors drive that will help to address any conflicts that come along, because you recognize and you're laying it out up front. I'm like, this is how I operate. Here's who I am. And if there's a conflict here, I'm going to resolve it, but I'm going to resolve it, in a way such that it does not take me out of alignment with who I am and how I operate in a personal and professional way. I know some of this has gotten a little esoteric, but it's really important for us to give thought to this. And I think it's perfect for the end of the year when we're doing a lot of reflection, right? This is a time of the year when we're doing a lot of reflection. I'm a huge advocate. This can happen at any point in the year, at any point. And so I encourage you to always keep those things in mind. Do a quarterly little reset. I'm a huge fan of doing quarterly check-ins and resets and annual, because that will help you to be fresh, to address things that maybe have shifted. And so where you can address anew what your level of accountability is in various situations with organizations, with your personal commitments. Because sometimes if you wait to only do it by the end of the year or the beginning of the year, like so much could have changed. I mean, hello, look at this year. So much could have changed in between when you made that commitment at the beginning and where you are right now that you will need to adjust. You will have needed to adjust. And so if you didn't, you could end up with some things in conflict at the end. All right? That's fine. Acknowledge it, but the important thing is to address it. Resolve the conflict and move on. Okay? All right. I think that's it. I think that is it. Thank you so much. Okay, so a couple of updates. Number one, that this is probably the last live coffee chat for the year. I will do the coffee chats for the next 2 Mondays. They will probably be pre-recorded so that I can get a break and get a vacation too. I don't know about vacation, but take a break. So I'm giving you notice, but I want to finish out this series on personal development and growth for the end of this term. So that is how I have decided to approach it. So there will be coffee time career chats the next 2 Mondays. They just will not be live, but I absolutely will be checking in on them. So if you have comments or questions or suggestions, I would love to hear from you on that. All right. So you can look forward to that, and we will finish out this series. The other thing is as a reminder that the 5 steps to career success in an economy workshop finished up last week. And we've been doing our bonus sessions, which have been great. I've had some great interviews over the course of the last couple of days. Tonight we are doing a Q&A session. It's really brief. It's me taking questions that have come in over the week quietly behind the scenes, or addressing scenarios that have come up. So that's what I will be doing tonight at 6 p.m. I think that's right. Yes, tonight at 6 p.m. And then tomorrow night, the last bonus session is another mindset session, and we will close things out. If you have not had a chance to go look at the videos and review the content from last week, you have the rest of today and all of tomorrow to do that, because Tuesday night at midnight, it all goes away. All right, so I want you to know that it all comes down inside the group, and the links for Zoom will be deactivated because I want you to make sure that you take action, and the only way to make sure you take action is to remove the goodies. So that is how that's going to go down. And what this also has meant is that the Career Catalyst Empowerment Coaching Program is now live and up. And I am excited about being able to launch this program in the new year. If you or someone you know is interested, please check out the link. Go, take the information, do with it what you will, make the commitment. If you want to talk about it some more, I'm happy to just schedule some time and we can get on the phone and talk a little bit more about what it is your needs are and how this program can address them. I'm super excited about it. There's so much coming. I literally just got off the phone this morning. We're talking through with one of my folks about what we're going to be doing for 2021. And so that's the reason why we need to take a break so that we can reset, regather, and build things out the way that we really want to, because 2021 is a lot of great stuff that's going to be continued from this year and fleshed out. All right. So thank you so much. Make sure to go check out the workshop content, to forward it to some other folks, let them get in on it here at the last 48 hours. And I will talk to you all later. Bye-bye.